Hello, and welcome back to the Audible Finish, a weekly show discussing the week gone by in the world of wrestling. I'm your host, Dimitri Kalos, and alongside me, as always, is my esteemed co-host, Thanasi. Welcome, Thanasi.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Let's talk some wrestling.
In this week's episode, we're going to review WWE's Smackdown and Raw season premieres, which saw LA Knight rise up as the Tribal Chief's next challenger and the Judgment Day reclaim the undisputed WWE Tag Team Championships. Later on, we will also look into what happened over on AEW, including Christian Cage's successful TNT Championship defense over the American Dragon Bryan Danielson, and the Icon Sting's announcement of his final ever wrestling match. If you are enjoying the podcast and have a moment, please like, share, and subscribe. On that note, let's get right into it. And to start off, if we're going to talk about SmackDown, for our listeners, if you would like to listen to one of the other segments ahead of this, please feel free to jump ahead using the time stamps in the description below. But on that note, Thanasi, why don't you take us through SmackDown?
Well, Dimitri, like you said, it was the season premiere of SmackDown, and opening the season premiere was a John Cena promo along with the returning Roman Reigns. And it turns out the big news is LA Knight is challenging Roman for the title. During this whole promo, I just want to note that Solo never took his eyes off of Cena except for one bare glimpse when he turned around to look at LA Knight. This promo also included Jimmy briefly, and it was used to set up the night's main event. And there's a particular detail that I just want to point out here. There was a great shot from the camera team where they zoomed in on LA Knight's face, and he was wearing the reflective sunglasses that showed one image in each eye, and that was the face of the tribal chief. I thought that was brilliant camera work, so I just want to call out that particular detail. Dimitri, thoughts on LA Knight being our new number one contender, probably for Crown Jewel?
Yeah, I would definitely believe it's for Crown Jewel. I have mixed emotions on this purely because we know he's not going to win, and I'm just a little bit worried that this will be seen as his moment, and then he loses, and then his popularity goes right back down. In terms of actually seeing him get an opportunity like this, I'm thrilled for him, and I think it's well deserved.
I agree with you. I personally think that a non-Saudi Arabia show would have been better, and even better, a mid-card title reign would have been fantastic because it would have given him something to work with. Because it just feels like he's going to be a transitional number one contender, which has been the case for a long time.
I would like to add, on that note, a bit of fantasy booking. We know, because it was revealed on Raw this week, that Logan Paul he's got his eyes on Rey Mysterio's US title, and we know that Logan Paul and LA Knight exchanged a bit of a back and forth. So what if Logan Paul were to beat Rey Mysterio, sort of goad LA Knight for him having won a title before him, and then LA Knight wins it off Logan Paul, and that's like a nice little exchange. So essentially, you're taking the title off Ray and putting it on LA Knight without having to have those two compete.
That is an interesting suggestion. I have a problem with Logan Paul even being a champion, but I sense
Of
that they
course.
are going to go in that direction. But that is a decent suggestion. Moving on, next on the show was Elton Prince is back from injury. Yes, boy, he exclaims. On the day, of course, Australian time, while SmackDown was being broadcast, was the day of the Australian referendum on the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice to Parliament. If only Australia had listened to what Elton Prince had to say when he got up from that wheelchair from his broken arm. He, of course, teamed with Kit Wilson, and they had a good TV match against the Brawling Brutes. Next up was Bayley versus Zelina Vega, with Bayley winning comfortably. And another big segment, Triple H was the star of this segment. He had a massive announcement. Adam Pearce is relieved of his duties as a WWE official and promoted to the new general manager of Monday Night Raw. The new general manager of Friday Night SmackDown, however, is former NWA champion Nick Aldis, also known as Magnus from TNA, also recognized as the husband of seven-time world champion Mickie James. And his first big announcement as the GM is that SmackDown has won, as part of the trade for Jey Uso, the services of Kevin Owens. Dimitri, two big pieces of news here. Kevin Owens is on SmackDown now, separated from Sami Zayn. I'm sure you'll take us through a bit more of that. But Nick Aldis, basically on the main roster. He's a massive bloke. You and I have seen him from elsewhere. He was at All In 2018. I think that's one of his more prominent pay-per-view appearances in recent years. But where do you think they're going to take this bloke? Do you think he's actually going to get into a wrestling role soon?
I don't know about soon. It depends what we quantify as soon, but I do think we will see him in a wrestling capacity in WWE. I saw a comment on social media that I thought was actually quite intuitive, and it was claiming that this is their way of introducing Nick Aldis to the WWE universe. Because as you noticed, he didn't necessarily get that big of a reaction when he was announced.
He didn't even get entrance music. He just came basically from ringside.
Yes, and realistically, not a lot of people, the mainstream wise, know about the NWA these days and would know of his work. So I think this is probably the way they're doing to introduce him. And then I do see somewhere down the line, probably within a year, not like too soon, but probably within the year of now, he will probably be there in a wrestling capacity. And I hope so, because he's a very talented guy and he's not like aged out of in-ring competition. He's only in his mid-30s. So
He's 36.
well, there you go. 36 is nothing these days. 36 is like 30 back in the day. So I do think we will see him, and I'm very excited to actually just have him there as on-screen talent.
It'll be good to see him around. I actually think that in the works, potentially over time, they may want to draw even Mickie James back to the WWE. She didn't part ways in the best manner. However, we never say never with the WWE. Anything can happen in the World Wrestling Federation, as they say. But I do think that perhaps down the line we will be seeing that seven-time. Actually, I think she's six-time women's world champion in WWE, but has a couple reigns outside in TNA as well.
And I just want to quickly draw attention. That is all true. I want to quickly draw attention that I think Nick Aldis is already starting to show a bit of his unique suave flavor in the careful delivery of him in shaking hands with the Dominic Mysterio and saying, "I'm a big fan of your dad." I thought now he said it far better than I did. So for anyone that hasn't seen the segment yet, go back and watch it on YouTube because it was fantastic.
Well, the semi-main event of the evening for SmackDown was Cody Rhodes and Jey Uso taking on Austin Theory and Grayson Waller for the tag team titles. They're not getting any rest, but the champs do end up retaining with a Cody or a 1D, followed by a suicide dive and Crossroads as well. And this is, mind you, this is defense number 2 of 3 in a period of 8 days. So they defended last week when we discussed on Monday Night Raw. They defended this time, and they will also be defending against the Judgment Day as part of Monday Night Raw for this next coming episode. You'll take us through that very shortly. But there's a lovely interaction that we get as they exit, and we have Roman's theme being played, Solo, Jimmy, and Roman face off against Cody and Jey Uso. No words are spoken. It's old foes and potentially future rivals as well. I think Cody could have done the same with Aldis as well, if you remember, because as I mentioned, All in 2018 was when Cody Rhodes took the NWA World's title off of Nick Aldis for a wonderful feel-good moment. I think it's the first and possibly only a father-son combination to have held that very prestigious 10 pounds of gold. I'm not sure if there's any other combination. But I would look forward to a Cody confrontation with Nick Aldis down the road as well. What do you reckon?
Oh, absolutely, I would. I think that's actually one of the propositions that excites me the most. Just to see that story play out a bit further. And I just want to quickly draw attention to the stare-off moment that you just brought up. I really appreciate that they had that moment between Roman and Cody, because that to me is like a sign of faith that this is the guy. And the other thing I appreciate as well is that you get the sense that this is going to be a bit of a longer term story being told, as we all hypothesize that it will take place at Mania in whichever way they figure out to configure it. But I appreciate it. I'm very much on the Cody train, I have been since his return back in WrestleMania 38. So I really appreciate the moment, and I hope that they do follow through.
Well, look, I hope for the same thing. I think also just let's mention that both of the Usos were on opposite sides of this confrontation as well. I very much would like to see, and I very much think it's going to be the case, that the Usos are going to have singles competition at the next WrestleMania. That is going to be awesome. It's going to be our next version of, say, the Owen and Brett at WrestleMania, the Matt and Jeff at WrestleMania, and soon we're going to be getting Jimmy and Jay at WrestleMania as well. That just makes me salivate to see them in singles competition as well. But as we move on, the main event of the evening is Solo Sikoa versus LA Knight, and unsurprisingly, LA Knight gets the victory. That is the end of the show, but shall we briefly discuss another confrontation that happened on the show? One Jade Cargill and Charlotte Flair. I just want to put my view out there. I think Charlotte is a great introduction for Jade because you don't need Charlotte to be like a victorious babyface, which is what they love her to be in the WWE. You can have her playing the babyface and just establishing Jade as this extremely powerful heel that's going to go on a monster run. And I think SmackDown's a good place for her away from Nia Jax because Nia Jax is already playing that powerful heel, and we've got Rhea Ripley there. We wanted to have a strong title reign, but Jade Cargill can have a really good run against Charlotte. She can take on Bayley. She can take on Io Sky. It's a lot of talent for her to work with. What do you reckon?
Well, it's an interesting one with Jade. I loved the confrontation, and I also enjoyed the one which, just as a earlier taste, which the confrontation she had on Raw with Becky Lynch. So I like that they're having her pair up against these big stars of the division. I just don't know yet where they want to fit her, because I also believe that she shouldn't win a title for a little while, because you want to establish her first, and like you said, you want Rhea Ripley to have a nice reign. Ideally, you want Io Sky to hold it for a little while, and those two probably shouldn't be disturbed right now by a Jade Cargill. I've said this, I've said this for years. I would love to see Charlotte in a feud, not a title feud, just a regular feud. And I think Jade would be a perfect person for something like that.
I 100% agree. I think this would be a perfect pairing for them, right? I don't think with Becky it would be quite the same because Becky does have the NXT Women's title. It's fine to just let that storyline find its completion, but have it go up against Charlotte, and then Charlotte can go off and take time off again. I think that's my view. But overall, that's our SmackDown recap for this week.
All right, well, let's now move on to this week's Raw. So, a quick rundown of what happened on Raw this week. It started with Sami Zayn in a promo saying that despite Kevin Owens' trade, he's excited because he sees himself as a World Heavyweight Champion level wrestler. He does get interrupted by the Judgment Day because it's Raw. They try to beat him up, but Jay makes the save. And then backstage, there is a mini confrontation between the two where Sami does say that he holds Jay accountable for losing Kevin Owens. This then led into the opening contest of the night, which saw Shinsuke Nakamura beat Ricochet in a Falls Count Anywhere match. A very exciting way to open the show. And actually, I think this would have been a great way to start Raw this week. Just go straight into the action, just have a nice little match, and then go into the rest. Did you feel the same way?
Yeah, I actually made a note here that the match began at 23 minutes past the hour, right? So this is a wrestling show, and it took us 23 minutes on a 3-hour broadcast to get to the first match. So 100% agree with you, because this wouldn't have just been opening the night. This would have been opening the new season with an amazing Falls Count Anywhere match. So 100% agree.
After that, we had Natalya versus Piper Niven, and Piper Niven got the win. And I just want to quickly highlight, because this did make the rounds a little bit in the memes of wrestling, and there was a kid that copped a feel from Natalya when she was out in the rampway. We don't endorse that sort of behavior, kids. You got to make sure, keep your hands to yourselves. You got to respect the talent. Isn't that right, Thanassia?
Oh, 100%. Just because they're public figures and they're performing does not mean that you have any right to touch them.
Yes. Next up, there was a promo exchange between Seth Rollins and Drew McIntyre. Seth Rollins questioned McIntyre based on a chat he had with Rhea Ripley last week that was caught in the background of a Byron Saxton Ricochet interview. Drew ignored this and said that this is his third moment in the world title picture where he's got the momentum and he's not going to let it slip like he did the second time against Roman at Clash of the Castle, and not capitalizing in front of a full crowd like he had at WrestleMania when he beat Brock Lesnar. Rollins stated that he will win the match, he will defend his title, and that this will be a good thing for Drew because for the first time in a long time, he will have no one to blame but himself. So some harsh words there, obviously building up the tension. Johnny Gargano then wrestled Ludwig Kaiser, and notably, the German managed to get the win, thanks to a little bit of intervention from Giovanni Vinci. This was followed with a match between Rhea Ripley and Shayna Baszler, and the match actually got interrupted by Nia Jax, Raquel Rodriguez, and Zoe Stark, the latter of which actually caused the DQ finish, and it was later confirmed by Adam Pearce that those 5 wrestlers will compete in a 5-way match at Crown Jewel for the title. I'm not a big fan of multi-person matches when I feel like it's unnecessary. In this case, I think it's unnecessary. Do you agree?
I will agree. However, I will say this. I'd rather have kind of like a throwaway multi-person match at a Crown Jewel for a Saudi Arabia show, which should be a glorified house show, than giving us a marquee match on that card, right? We want to have these big money matches in for the real hardcore audiences, I believe. So I'd rather it take place there than on a main show.
Well, let's get into the final 2 matches of the night, which occupied the last hour of Raw. And for the first time in a long time, it was matches that really I felt were the highlight of the episode. In this case, Gunther defended Bronson Reed for the Intercontinental. He defended his Intercontinental Championship against Bronson Reed, rather. And I just want to say, I think this was Bronson Reed's best match in WWE and possibly ever. I think that he really paired up well against Gunther, which shocked me because Gunther usually works better with smaller wrestlers that he can bully. But in this case, I think they really made a good story between the two, and they made it work. And notably, Bronson Reed's chest started bruising up just like like mincemeat, which is something that Wade Barrett actually brought up in commentary. And he was almost no-selling it, which I thought was just a great little visual alone. And there was a fantastic sequence to end the match, which saw Bronson Reed superplex Gunther for a near fall. And then he attempted his tsunami splash, but Gunther managed to avoid it. He hit his drop kick, clothesline, and then landed his own splash for another near fall. And eventually, and almost like in disbelief at this moment, he managed to muster up the strength to actually powerbomb the big Aussie wrestler to get the win. So honestly, I just thought this was a really solid outing for Bronson Reed. I think we know by now what Gunther's capable of, but I think this was one of those matches that Bronson Reed will reflect back on and say, I may not have gotten the win, but I definitely showed what I'm about.
And as far as experience, Bronson Reed actually got a chance to play the babyface in this match as well. With a gimmick like his, it's actually very hard to be able to do that, right? So the fact we had a unique situation where he was up against Gunther, who could play a realistic, just powerhouse to take on Bronson Reed. So it was a good piece of experience. He was able to play the resilient babyface as well. But overall, this match really was a pay-per-view caliber match, I believe, right? It was perhaps the only one of the night. Now, of course, we don't expect people to be performing at pay-per-view level on television, but when you get it on television every once in a while, like we did here, it's just a real treat, I think. So those are my thoughts.
I completely agree. And I think the reason for that is because guys like Gunther doesn't get to defend his title at every pay-per-view, and guys like Bronson Reed sparingly gets pay-per-view matches. So I think giving them that time is always a nice little thing. And I think it contrasted well, given that the main event of the night, the other title match was Cody Rhodes and Jey Uso versus the Judgment Day for the Undisputed WWE Tag Team Championships. And I don't want to dwell too much on the action of the match, but I do want to talk about the finish, which has seen the Judgment Day reclaim the titles. And I don't know about you. I just think that I'm not a big fan of hot potatoing anything, because to me, it feels like it cheapens the value of the title. And in this case, I know that there is an argument to be made that in the absence of Rhea Ripley, the Judgment Day sort of capitulated, and now they've they've like a phoenix risen from the ashes of their own defeats and come out once more victorious. So from that point, I get it, but I don't know. I just think that it feels like 9 days have been wasted giving it to Cody and Jay.
Yeah, look, I agree with you. And look, I understand if there's an argument that were to be made that while Rhea was gone, Dominic lost his NXT North American Championship, and then Priest and Balor lost their tag titles. And now, since she's returned, they've reclaimed them. I get if someone wants to make that argument, but it does feel like just a little bit of rewind, basically. I mean, they even had the spot on the ramp where they lifted the titles and got pyro. So I'm wondering what the hell's going on here. And again, I can't stress this enough. It just feels like we're recycling ideas in the main event scene on Monday Night Raw. And I mean, overall, it was a really good show. I mean, like, we had a very passionate Sami Zayn promo where he's declaring himself as a main event guy. And we know that both creatively speaking and in terms of booking, that really is true now. We got that Falls Count Anywhere match that you said, with the shooting star press spot off the elevated platform in the crowd. We had the massive IC title match. Johnny Wrestling showed off his arsenal as well. So overall, it was a good episode. But, well, like, my main notes here on this main event match were title change WTF question mark. Like, that was my big reaction to it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't
That's
think
it. Like, that's it.
there's nothing else to add to it. And I think I just feel that if they were going to do this story, it'd make more sense if Rhea Ripley was away for like a month or two, where it's like
Yes,
there's been enough
agreed.
time
What
that
actually means, yes, 100%.
All right, well, on that note, let's move on to AEW, starting with the latest episode of Collision. Thanasir, you are the Collision expert on this show, so why don't you take us through it?
Let me walk us through Collision. So the show opened with Adam Copeland, Christian with Luchasaurus, and Nick Wayne and his bodyguards. And they were then joined by Bryan Danielson, Ricky Starks, and Big Bill, as well as FTR. And all I could think when I'm listing out these people is, good Lord, what a convoluted opening segment. There was a little bit of how shall I put this? A convoluted exchange of words as well, when Adam Copeland Edge called Ricky Starks some kind of a vanilla midget version of The Rock, and then Ricky Starks responded with, "Wow, that really sent me over the edge." Of course, that was a reference to Adam Copeland's former name at WWE, but it did have that sensitivity because Over the Edge was the name of the pay-per-view where Owen Hart sadly passed away. So there was, I think, a little bit of heat backstage for using that specific phrase. But overall, it was good to see the freedom that they had to just have that quippy exchange. But sometimes it's good to just be able to clear things and make sure that we've got some coherence going on. But the opening contest was Willie Mack challenging Samoa Joe for the television title, the Ring of Honor television title. And these guys had, I would say, a good television match, actually. And Joe ended up winning using his muscle buster maneuver. The next up was Juice Robinson putting away the fallen angel Christopher Daniels in singles action after his patented DDT. In celebration, Jay White proposed to Juice with a knockoff Dynamite ring replica, which he used to land a sucker punch after the match on the fallen angel. And BCG then cut a promo with Daniels just lying down there, like knocked out cold, right, through the whole promo. And what I want to just bring up here with you, Dimitri, is that the direction of this faction is just so good. Like, I really, really love this. And I want to pose this booking question to you. Because I first, actually, I'm going to pose the question to us, and then I want to give an answer, and then you tell me what you think. Did Bullet Club Gold frame MJF for the Devil Attack? Now, in my view, I don't think I want them to have done that. My view is that I would rather have just like a really long, maybe like a 1 year or at least a 6-month tease of these people coming to back MJF. And I would love for the final reveal to be that it was Adam Cole and the Kingdom playing mind games this whole time with MJF for the inevitable heel turn that's going to happen. That is my fantasy booking. But Do you have views on who is behind these devil attacks? Is it BC Gold?
I don't know. And I think this is one of those things where I'm trying not to think too much about where it's leading, which is quite rare for me because I do like to sort of create my own headcanon just to sometimes keep me keep me invested in the story because otherwise I might just forget. But in this case, I'm just trying to live it. I'm not a big fan of the Bullet Club Gold being the ones because it's either just a weird scenario where they're attacking their own mate as a mind game for MJF, or it's a breakup story. And I love these guys too much together to want to see them separated. So I'm not a big fan of that.
I'm talking about in a year's time, though, right? Like we're trying to
Yeah.
really develop some emotional investment just so we can pull the carpet under the fans' feet.
Yeah, but like your version, I could see it working. But if it was in a year's time and it's the Bullet Club Gold, that turn, I still
Mm.
think, I don't know, I just don't know if that's the right way to go about it. I wouldn't be against seeing some other players completely out of left field that aren't even related to MJF in any way right now do it. So I don't know. We'll see how it goes. I think they've got potentially on their hands a Shield situation where they could really make some guys by having them be these MJF enforcers without his kind of approval.
That would be quite interesting. I would be down for that. However, let's move on here. So the next contest of the night is Kyle Fletcher, once again in singles action, defeating Boulder via the Dragon Sleeper. And it's nice to see the young Aussie that having a job and a very good job at that while his partner is injured. Like I think that's really good. That I mean, he's also been able to keep up in the ring, right? He's not undeservedly getting anything. But I think this is a good showcase of him. And another good showcase, one of women's wrestling, followed this one up when Chris Statlander hit Saturday Night Fever to retain the TBS title against Sky Blue in what was just a really solid TV match. And I want to note here, there was a good spot that I liked. Sky Blue leveraged the top rope exchange of strikes to jump down and deliver a huge power bomb on her much bigger opponent. I mean, Chris Statlander's not that big, right? She's got a solid frame, but Sky Blue is a very small frame. So seeing that power bomb was really, really impressive. And I'll also note at this point that we got a promotional package of Los Ingobernables, including Roosh as well. So we should be seeing them shortly on AEW television soon. That'll be pretty good. Next up, we get Keith Lee, who hits a pop-up sit-out power bomber to squash a jobber. Really not too much to bring up there, to be honest with you. And that brings us to main event time. Now, I want to recap this because I really liked this match, and then Dimitri, I'll throw to you for your thoughts. So it's the TNT title contest between Christian Cage and Bryan Danielson. The match started pretty simple before Danielson successfully started the locks with surfboard, a bow and arrow. Christian's main attack was focusing on the technician's forearm after he landed badly on a headbutt attempt. And he actually manages to drop a hammerlock slam on the apron onto American Dragon. So that was pretty brutal. Christian also hit a frog splash and corner springboard sunset flip powerbomb. And I could just think that he's in great shape. Like he's really wrestling some of the best work of his career. His reversal of the running knee into a spear and a kill switch actually got a 2.99 that was just so tense. And in the end, it was a dirty finish for the victory, as Big Bill provided the distraction for Ricky Starks to pummel Bryan's head in with the tag gold for the count. The show ends with pandemonium from the allies of both wrestlers, and Nick Wayne ends up hitting a Copeland spear for the babyface pop. So Copeland's really featuring prominently on AEW TV these days, and this is, at least right now, not just a cheap one-off ratings grab for AEW. Like they're really featuring him prominently on television. Did you have any thoughts on the match and also the standing of Adam Copeland at the moment, Dimitri?
For the match, the only thing that I was really thinking as I was watching it is, my God, I love these two wrestlers. And I want to say, a couple weeks ago, I expressed my frustrations or my concerns rather with Adam Copeland going to AEW. I had very similar concerns when Bryan Danielson debuted because I thought WWE had done a lot for him and I just didn't think it. But in these last 2 years, seeing the quality of wrestling that he's put on, it's really made me feel a lot more comfortable with him in a different environment. So if Adam Copeland can do similar work to what Bryan Danielson is doing, then I'll be happy. And since you asked, I do think so far Adam Copeland's stuff has been enjoyable. And I think it is working well. It helps for me that he's going up against Christian Cage, who is probably the hottest heel in the company right now. So, like, just on its own, it's engaging.
And organically the top heel, right? So the booking has fed into the fact that his character work was so good that we just had to see him being elevated, right? He was deservedly in a pay-per-view main event at the last pay-per-view Wrestle Dream.
Yeah, and look, I've got to say, AEW is lucky that happened because without MJF as the top heel, they can be lacking. And guys like Christian Cage and Samoa Joe have really stepped up since then.
Yep.
So I think it's really helping a lot. And even someone like Ricky Starks is starting to elevate his own profile. So
do you know what this reminds me of a little bit? Because now that you mentioned that you've got Joe and Christian Cage, first of all, Christian Cage main eventing not only a pay-per-view but also this most recent Collision, right? It's reminding me of circa 2000, 2001, I think maybe like even 1999, when RVD had the ECW television title. That was around the time where they were actually talking about the idea that maybe there's going to be a unification match between the television title and the ECW world title because he was just so hot in that position. And I think with the demise of the real world championship with the departure of CM Punk, that the TNT titles kind of stepped up as a pseudo second world title, at least on Collision, I would say. But it's exactly like you said that these guys, these veterans, have really, really stepped up in the wake of MJF playing the babyface these days. So I'm very like I congratulate them for really doing that. To be honest with you.
all right, well, Thanasi, on that note, let's get straight into Dynamite for this week. And the show started with Penta El Zero Miedo facing Jay White, the latter managing to get a victory after his Bullet Club Gold brethren gave him a bit of an assist. This was followed up with Hikaru Shida defending her AEW Women's World Championship successfully against Emi Sakura, her mentor. I'm just going to quickly note, I actually thought this was a really good match. I didn't prepare it as a highlight, but I thought it was worth mentioning on the side.
No, they did very well, and they played into the story as well, right? Protege and mentor, apprentice and master, or rather mistress here. So it was really nice.
All right. Well, the next up, we had Adam Copeland in a pre-recorded interview with Renee Paquette. This is a highlight, so I'll get into it a bit later. And then we had Wardlow squash Ryan Nemeth, better known as Dolph Ziggler's brother, with one powerbomb before a referee stoppage. And then afterwards, Tony Schiavone asked him what he's back for, and he simply put up his taped-up wrist that had the word MJF written on it. So we know exactly what he's here for. Following that, Kenny Omega had a interview with Renee Paquette backstage, during which MJF came in and whispered 13 days, bitch, into his ear. And this was later revealed by the commentators as a reference to him needing 13 more days to eclipse Kenny Omega's championship reign as the AEW champion. Following that, Adam Cole made PB&J sandwiches for the boys, and then finally left Roddy Strong's house after he didn't take to the sandwiches as he. I just want to quickly mention, like, are we done with these videos now? It seems like we're done.
I hope not. These are great. These are like the spiritual successor to the MJF and Adam Cole backstage segments.
Very true. We'll see how it takes off from here on in.
Yeah.
Following that, Don Callis came out with his family, minus the British icon in the making, Will Ospreay. And he said, I just wanted to mention here, I noticed finally the Last Supper graphic he has with his Titantron, and he's actually got himself with the others as his disciples. Obviously, Don Callis is Jesus Christ, our savior. And I just wonder, are we going to get to a point where he has a full table of disciples?
Yeah, the 12 disciples of Don Callis. Yes.
That would be very entertaining. This led into the match between Kenny Omega and Kyle Fletcher with Kenny Omega getting the win, although a valiant effort from the Sydney Sider, I think. And this was followed by another squash match, this time Lance Archer beating up. Honestly, I know they said his name, but I couldn't catch it. So I've just written down a jobber, which I think explains the situation perfectly anyway. And then finally, we had, at this point, Sting come out for his much-anticipated address to the fans. This is another highlight, so we'll get into it a bit later on. And the show concluded with the Dynamite Dozen Battle Royal, in which the Rock Hard Juice Robinson managed to get the victory, and that's setting up for a match between him and MJF next week on Dynamite for the Dynamite Diamond Ring. And I just want to quickly note here, and I say, is this the first time the winner of the Battle Royal hasn't actually won the ring?
I believe something like that. It's kind of like I think they call it a challenge round, where it's like it's borrowed from tennis, where it's like last year's champion only contests the final match, or something like that, I believe.
Okay, well, personally, I think it kind of makes it seem a lot more like we're helping out MJF. But you know, like, it's fine. Like, it's the Dynamite Diamond Ring. Like, it's synonymous with MJF at this point. I think we can forgive it, and it should lead to a good match between the pairing. But on that note, let's get into the highlights. So I wanted to talk firstly about this Adam Copeland interview with Renee Paquette, and he said some very interesting things here, where he sort of explained that he doesn't feel like he's held Christian back. He actually feels like he's the one that's pushed him along the entire way to truly live out his potential. Bring up the fact that when they were in high school and it took the first step, Edge was the one to first do it. Adam Copeland, rather. God, we're going to have a challenge getting through that every week. Adam Copeland said that he signed off like a sort of like a little submission for like why he should be in a wrestling school.
It was an essay writing contest, and I remember it because it's actually come up in trivia a lot that's how he got into wrestling. Like he won his wrestling lessons because the family couldn't afford it.
And that same essay writing competition, he said he and Christian were going to submit, but only he actually did it. And then when he got into WWE, he spent months on end trying to convince them to bring along Christian, prove, like, saying that he's so talented. So he kind of feels like with their history, he has been helping him. He hasn't been a hindrance to his career. And then he concludes by saying a very powerful thing, which is, I'm not going to fight him. He refuses to fight his best friend, which I think is a really interesting statement to make. And it makes me suspect that this storyline is either got a lot more legs, or it could be something they put on hold before they get the eventual match down the line. What did you make of the whole segment?
I think as a segment, it was really successful. I think they did very well. To be honest with you, I was a little bit surprised that they're going with this. I don't want to fight him. We've seen that before with, the Undertaker and Kane, where that was the point. And of course, I think we can say that Copeland has defeated Luchasaurus now. Probably Nick Wayne along the line as well. Certainly, this match will be along at some point. Whether they do it at Full Gear or later on, I'm not quite sure. But I think it would be nice to see that kind of a match earlier rather than later. I don't think there's any kind of need to put it on the back burner yet. So I'd love to see it at Full Gear as soon as November.
It's interesting that you bring up Nick Wayne because, and I forgot to mention this, there was a segment he had with his mother, a sit-down interview with JR, and afterwards he and Christian got attacked by Darby Allin. So I think it's fair to say, like, we all thought Darby and Nick is the natural feud in this ongoing story. And it's the same, I think, with Christian Cage and Adam Copeland. So do we need to find someone for Luchasaurus to go up against? Should we turn Jack Perry into a face again and start that up again?
Ooh, that would be fascinating.
But all in all, I am interested where this is going. And admittedly, with every passing episode of AEW television, I'm getting more and more used to the idea of Adam Copeland being in that company. So,
and of course, being used to calling him Adam Copeland rather than Edge after all these years.
Yeah, well, it helps that he's got a few acting credits. I've seen the name before. It's not completely foreign.
Yeah.
All right, well, the next highlight I wanted to talk about is Sting. Now, Sting came out and it was initially a sort of set up as an in-ring interview with Tony Schiavone, but quickly Sting took to the mic and gave the address that he needed to. And he's laid it out all on the line and said that He's going to have his final match at AEW Revolution next year, exactly 3 years after his first match with the company. Uh, it felt very much like a tepid crowd, not in the sense they weren't engaged, but it felt like they were almost empty at the notion that the icon will actually have to cease wrestling.
Look, I think if I can just make this point, Sting is over 60 years old, right? So a lot of the fans in this crowd have not grown up with Sting. In fact, there's someone that when they've been growing up, Sting has already been a veteran, right? So it's hard to invoke that kind of emotion when you've got people like Christian and Edge already basically 50 years old, and they're the ones coming up to save Sting. So perhaps that's part of the explanation for it. But it was a little bit sad because you would expect a little bit more for someone of his caliber, don't you think?
Well, again, like I don't think it was that the crowd was void of interest or emotion. It's just that they said it. So he's been such a stalwart in wrestling that it's just hard to sort of imagine him out of it in that way. It's kind of like with Ric Flair. Like when we were growing up, Ric Flair, we knew he was already a legend and certainly well past his peak. But you couldn't really imagine a world in which he wasn't involved. And it seems Ric Flair's also couldn't imagine a world where he wasn't involved because, he wrestled
He's
as
had like
recently as last
half a
year.
dozen retirements.
Yeah. But I did think it was I did think it was a good segment, and I think I do enjoy that it wasn't a I'm retiring today or I'm retiring in a week's time. Like he said it well in advance now, so it's kind of like in that time we can get used to the idea of him being gone.
And I think that's actually a very Japanese style. In Japan, they do like a retirement year or like a retirement tour building up to the last match, and it's billed as the last match. I know that the Western style tends to be kind of like a retirement match where it's like a career-threatening stipulation. But yeah, this feels a little bit kind of inspired by Japan. So maybe we'll get a bit more Sting goodness squeezed out of the lemon before we get to that Revolution match.
Now, I just want to do a bit of predictions ahead of it. Firstly, what match will it be? Will it be a tag team match? Will it be a trios? Will it be singles? And again, is this a match in which he sort of has just a friend v friend exchange with Darby Allin and sort of passes the reins over?
That's exactly my thought. I think it's going to be his last match is going to be a singles match. It's going to be against Darby Allin, and he's going to put Darby over and pass the torch over. I believe that's like sometimes, I think we've said before, predictable is right. And I think this is an instance where predictable is right.
Is there any stake? Sorry, is there any point in potentially just making it another farewell happy thing where he teams up with Darby Allin one final time, and that's
Well,
the last match?
I think that would be safer for him to be in a tag match where there's not, the danger of injuring him in his last contest. But I've just got the feeling that he'd prefer to go out on a singles contest.
Well, that brings us to the end of this week's edition of the Audible Finish. Next week, we're going to be reviewing the shows as always, as they're now building up to Crown Jewel and Full Gear, respectfully. So be sure to, respectively, not respectfully. So
Nice.
be sure to tune in. Thanasi, great to have your company as always.
Excellent to be here. Thanks very much.
Thank you to everyone for tuning in. And until next time, we hope everything you do is just too sweet.